The Battle of Prokhorovka was fought on July 12, 1943 near Prokhorovka, 87 kilometers southeast of Kursk, in the Soviet Union, during the Second World War. Taking place on the Eastern Front, the engagement was part of the wider Battle of Kursk and occurred when the 5th Guards Tank Army of the Soviet Red Army attacked the 2nd SS Panzer Corps of the German Waffen-SS in one of the largest tank battles in history. The 5th Guards Tank Army suffered significant losses in the attack, but succeeded in preventing the Wehrmacht from capturing Prokhorovka and breaking through the 3rd defensive belt, the last heavily fortified one. Having failed to achieve his objective, Hitler, despite the advice of his commanders, cancelled Operation Citadel and began redeploying his forces to deal with new pressing developments elsewhere. Despite this, by the end of July 5 the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich had advanced through the 1st defensive belt on the southern side of the salient and reached the 2nd, although the plan was to breach the first 2 belts and reach the 3rd on the first day. Nonetheless, Das Reich's penetration caused great concern among Soviet commanders, compelling Vatutin to commit almost all of the Voronezh Front's operational reserves by the end of the first day. Das Reich Division operated in the southern sector of the Kursk Bulge during the Battle of Prokhorovka. It was pulled out of the battle along with the other SS divisions when the offensive was discontinued, giving the strategic initiative to the Red Army. Das Reich met with stiff resistance as well and had great difficulty creating and maintaining a bridgehead across the northern Donets River. They eventually succeeded by the morning of July 6, but the delay in their advance kept them from protecting the east flank of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. Late on July 6, the 5th Guards Tank and 5th Guards Armies of the Steppe Front began moving up from their reserve position. The 5th Guards Tank Army covered the 320 to 390 kilometers, 200 to 240 miles, over 3 days, and arrived at the Prokhorovka area on the night of July 9, and the 5th Guards Army's 33rd Guards Rifle Corps arrived at the settlement on the night of July 10. Both armies completed their journey and deployment intact without any substantial interference from the Luftwaffe. At 5:45 on July 12, Das Reich's headquarters started receiving reports of the sound of many tank engines as the Soviet tanks moved into their assembly areas for the attack. The Soviet forces began a preparatory artillery barrage at around 8 o'clock, and as the last shells fell at 8:30, Rotmistrov radioed the code words, "Steel, steel, steel." The order to commence the attack. With that the Soviet armor of the 5th Guards Tank Army began their advance. In total, about 500 tanks and self-propelled guns of the 5th Guards Tank Army attacked the positions of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps on July 12, doing so in 2 waves, with 430 tanks in the first echelon and 70 more in the second. In a 3-hour battle the German Tigers engaged the Soviet tanks at ranges from 1,000 meters down to point blank, inflicting heavy losses on the Soviet tankers and repelling their attack. None of the Tigers were lost. The Allied invasion of Sicily on the night of 9 to 10 July, combined with the Soviet counteroffensive of Operation Kutuzov against the flank and rear of General Walter Model's 9th Army on the northern side of the Kursk salient on July 12, and the attacks by strong Soviet forces at Prokhorovka the same day had caused Hitler to stop the offensive and begin redeploying forces to the Mediterranean theater. He ordered his generals to terminate Operation Citadel. Manstein was greatly disappointed. He argued that his forces were now on the verge of achieving a major breakthrough on the southern side of the salient. As he saw it, with his 3rd Panzer Corps about to link up with the 2nd SS Panzer Corps at Prokhorovka, and with the 24th Panzer Corps available as his operational reserve, they would be halting the offensive just at the moment when victory was in hand. With an eye towards the west, Hitler was unwilling to continue the offensive. Manstein persisted, proposing that his forces should at least destroy the Soviet reserves in the southern Kursk salient before Citadel was finally terminated, so that the Soviet fighting capacity in the sector would be depleted for the rest of the summer. Hitler agreed to continue offensive operations in the southern salient until Manstein's goal was achieved. After the meeting with Hitler on July 13, Manstein hastily put together the plans for Operation Roland. The assault began at 4 o'clock on July 14. Following a brief artillery barrage, the 4th SS Panzergrenadier Regiment Der Führer of Das Reich struck out for the high ground southwest of Pravorat, evicting the remnants of the 2nd Guards Tank Corps from the village of Belenikino following house-to-house and hand-to-hand fighting. Das Reich's 2nd SS Panzer Regiment fought off a series of counterattacks and forced the Red Army units to withdraw eastward to a new line. The 7th Panzer Division of the 3rd Panzer Corps made contact with Das Reich, but the link-up failed to trap the Soviet forces. Operation Roland failed to produce a decisive result for the German side. In the early afternoon of July 17, Operation Roland was terminated with an order for the 2nd SS Panzer Corps to begin withdrawing from the Prokhorovka sector back to Belgorod. The 4th Panzer Army and Army Detachment Kempf anticipated the order and began executing it as early as the evening of July 16. The 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte tanks were distributed between Das Reich and Totenkopf, and the division was hastily redeployed to Italy, while Das Reich and Totenkopf were dispatched south to meet the new Soviet offensives. Reliable figures for tank and personnel casualties for the Red Army in the Battle of Prokhorovka are difficult to establish. The 5th Guards Tank Army Headquarters summarized the combat losses incurred by the formation on 12 Juli. 600 to 650 tanks of the 5th Guards Tank Army were damaged or destroyed while fighting the 2nd SS Panzer Corps. The 2nd SS Panzer Corps reported estimated total of 60 to 80 tanks and assault guns were damaged or destroyed in combat on July 12. By the end of July 16, the 2nd SS Panzer Corps had 292 serviceable tanks and assault guns, almost the same number it had at the beginning of the battle on July 12. A Soviet General Staff study of the Battle of Kursk reported that the Germans lost 300 tanks, 20 assault guns in the battle from 12 to July 16 inclusive. However, archival data of the German units involved show that much smaller losses were incurred during the battle.